we bumped into the mics significantly less.
Yes, I know I hit it once. I don't even remember why.
I think it's coffee. We keep putting coffee on the wrong side, and then this is where the coffee. It ends up being in the shot now, but it's not.
Do we have to actually do it like a bad stage production, like tape off stuff, like mark a thing? Coffee goes here.
Yeah, coffee goes here. We should do blocking.
Gotta hit your mark. Gotta hit your mark. Gotta hit your coffee mark.
It's weird because you're the one drinking Tim Hortons today, and I'm not. I feel wrong. I feel like I've betrayed some private joke.
It was funny. So I did see somebody comment that like yours said World War Zoo, and I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, because
then when I looked at it, it was the 60 logo from that.
Yeah. Well, because it's funny because right now, except for bringing back all the cigarette smoke, they're doing like a nostalgia thing right now at Tim Hortons, which is our local Canadian coffee brand for those of you international people watching this. And I think there's a few places in the States still, but there's actually one in London, in the UK.
Yeah, I know.
There's a Tim Hortons in the UK as well.
I know.
I forgot about that. But the joke is they're doing like a nostalgia tour where they brought back the Dutchie, which is very important.
Walnut Crunch, that was the one.
Walnut Crunch for you. The Dutchie was the one for me. And these are like donuts that no one ate except for kids from the 80s. And so they stopped making them. The only thing they don't have is the ashtrays, and you can't sit down with a knife and fork and eat your breakfast.
If you don't believe that nostalgia is a powerful thing, I was on Facebook, same idea, right? And somebody posted up wherever they live, Pizza Hut has brought back Pizza Hut Classic, and it's like all the old fixtures, it's all the old stuff.
Oh, a salad bar.
And instantly, I'm like, I have to go there. I don't even want to eat a Pizza Hut, but I was like, I need to play Galaga and eat some pizza and drink out of plastic textured red cups.
I need to do my reading so that I can get a free pizza from Pizza Hut for the Pizza Hut literacy blitz. Hey everybody, welcome to Nostalgia Cast, where I talk about pulling over the car immediately to make my kids try Dutchies. It didn't go well.
Today's Grimdark Media is brought to you by Pizza Hut and Tim Hortons.
Waiting for that sponsorship money. Well, today actually, I'll take sponsorship money from these guys though. We are covering This Is Game Media today, and I got to do a pick, which I'm very excited about because this is probably one of the most formative, I would say, like game experiences I had as a kid. And it is a bit controversial for its time. It came out in 1984. It was the 10th and final of the original run books in the series. It is Fighting Fantasy's House of Hell, written by Steve Jackson, which is one of the two co-founders or three founders of Games Workshop. And is, I think, probably the thing that initiated that conversation with my parents where they're like, hey, we're seeing a lot of things on the news about...
so about this House of Hell you're going to.
It was between this and the other uncomfortable moment I had was when I got my Realms of Chaos book, and there's like a parental advisory on the cover.
Wow. I don't know. It has
it. No, mine has that. Mine has maybe it was North American printing.
Right.
But there is a not for kids parental advisory with like an age restriction logo on my copy of Realms of Chaos.
Talked about this before and I couldn't find my copy because I wanted to bring it to show you, but there was
Slaves to Darkness, by the way, not Lost in the Dam.
But there was a run of fighting fantasy books done specifically for the US market that had a different style of cover art. And this book in that run was House of Hades. It wasn't House of Hell.
So this was published in 1984. The ones that came after this, because these books became so successful, these choose your own adventure books, they were like written by other authors, but these are written by the original authors. And this is at a time where there's basically like two kinds of choose your own adventure books. There's the kinds with fighting and the kinds that don't have fighting. The choose your own adventure books that were like the ones you could get usually like the school library were actually called choose your own adventure.
Yeah, the actual Scholastic
Scholastic ones, or Pick a Path.
Yep.
And they're a classic form of like handheld RPG, pre-video game era, late 70s, early 80s, went through into the 90s. And they had a real renaissance as basically like the Game Boys of the past. And so for those of you that don't know what fighting fantasy is or choose your own adventure, they've been lampooned recently during like the 80s nostalgia phase of like Stranger Things and stuff like that. It's kind of had a bit of a renaissance. And Jay and my friendship really bonded over us both owning a copy of the 25th anniversary. Of
the hardcover Warlock of Firetop Mountain.
Yeah, which was the first book in the series. Now, House of Hell is, again, it's incredibly formative for me because this takes fighting fantasy, which had its own established lore and world and moved around a bit, but was kind of building its own universe, and completely removes it from that and tells a either gothic or Lovecraftian, take your pick kind of, because it goes interchangeable, horror story.
So we kind of touched on this 100 videos ago when we were talking, maybe it was when we were talking about fighting fantasy and advanced fighting fantasy, I don't remember. But is at the time of the run of the original books, Ian Livingstone was doing all of this world building, Alancia Titan stuff.
Right.
And it seemed like all of the Steve Jackson solo books were the ones where he was introducing new and different game mechanics.
Innovating.
So like his first one was Citadel of Chaos, where you had the magic system. And then the next one, in terms of breaking that world thing, the next one he wrote solo was Starship Traveler.
Right, which is a science fiction one.
Yeah.
But this one's set, and what was weird to me and blew my mind was, and I'd read kind of more benign, like, choose your adventure books where it's like you're a camp counselor or you're like a kid lost in the woods or whatever, because they tried to put it into your shoes as a kid reading the books. In this one, you're just a guy whose car breaks down on his way to an appointment, air quotes, lonely night, and it finds this house and hopes to find a telephone, and then ensues horror movie, basically, in a lot of cases, adult and terrifying way. And it gets more terrifying kind of as we go. So just to give some context, this is published in 1984. In 1980, the book Michelle Remembers gets published, which is, again, a Canadian wife of a psychiatrist. He is interested in regression therapy, and it's been kind of debunked now, this memoir, but she basically is regressed to remember like crazy satanic rituals and all this like insane stuff that seem to coincide with The Omen and Rosemary's Baby a lot.
You're a big fan of medical fraud. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah. But this kicks off what's called the Satanic Panic. And the Satanic Panic is a period between roughly 1980 and the 90s, where there are legitimate like congressional inquests into whether or not there's a satanic cult loose in North America and across the world.
All of you D&D fans at the time will remember Chick Tracks, which were those
the comic
Jack
books,
Chick, black and
white comic books.
Yep.
Those still got handed out at Games Workshop stores in the 90s.
Oh, I know, they're still kicking around. I love those things.
I have a pile of them. They're incredible. Let's do a ritual. There's like my D&D character taught me how to they're incredible. Actually, they've been memed a lot in the early days of the internet too. They got memed a whole lot.
Those things are out where the buses don't run.
Yeah. But there's a group formed with Patricia Pulling and Thomas Radecki, who's the head of the Coalition for TV Standards and Practices, like ethics in TV, who fought, I think, against Reagan when they started taking the educational stuff out of TV.
I think that's right.
It's when the basically at the period at which you got He-Man and Transformers, when there didn't have to be any educational stuff anymore, and they'd put the bare minimum in, which was the famous G.I. Joe PSAs at the end of every G.I. Joe episode.
Knowing is in fact half the battle.
Yeah. Bottom massage.
Knowing how you got knowing is half the battle is in fact half the battle.
Well, they form BAD, which is Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, a group that wages kind of a campaign of misinformation about what D&D is. And you and I both have these experiences about RPGs in this era, and this is my first one. This book is my first one because it's a horror book. So our car's broken down. We've lost in a storm on a stormy night, and we approach this dilapidated house in the woods, and I guess the British countryside.
Yeah, you're 20 miles away from some non-existent town no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I guess we should establish for context, because, your car breaks down, you're in the middle of nowhere. 1984, for any of those of you who don't remember that time or weren't alive during that time, means you don't have a cell phone. No. It's not a thing.
No. You don't have a cell phone. You have to go and try and find a landline.
The only way you have a cell phone is if you're a drug dealer on Miami Vice. That's it.
You have a car phone. It's not even a cell phone. It's a car phone.
It's hooked up to your DeLorean.
Yeah, it's attached to your car. Or you're being dropped off at Nakatomi Tower by Argyle. The greatest limousine driver of all time. But we're basically trapped in a rainstorm, and this is it. We're gonna go into Spookaboo Manor, and set, I guess, a bon voyage through the boneyard up to the door and knock and see if anybody's home.
Pack your bags and chew off your fingers. It's time for Bon Voyage.
All right, so Bon Voyage is where we spoil everything. So if you've never played House of Hell, this Choose Your Own Adventure book, first of all, what have you been doing with your life? This is a classic. You should absolutely find a copy of it.
And unlike a lot of the older ones, this one is currently in print. It's one of the reprints that Scholastic is doing under their current run of books.
Doesn't have the cool Ian Miller cover. I think that one has new art too, doesn't it?
It has new art, and I'll touch on that in a minute because the art style is radically different, but there's one particular piece that's unbelievably disappointing.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah. So this book takes place in 3 acts, and I will say this book changed how I looked at fighting fantasy novels, because this book was the easiest to die in of any fighting fantasy book I've ever played.
I think it was the first, to my recollection, maybe, because this is before Freeway Fighter. It was the first book that introduced a second way to die.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a fear mechanic. Actually, I think Phantoms of Fear also has the fear mechanic in it. Way down the road, though. Also is a great Ian Miller cover. But House of Hell, basically, in the fighting fantasy sort of like lexicon, not only does it have lots of ways to die, there's lots of moments where you are not a hero. And that's made abundantly clear at the beginning of this, where you're like a heroic adventurer in almost all of the books leading up to this. You are a regular, unarmed Joe Schmo. You have no provisions, you got no potion, you got no weapon. And in fact, when you generate your stats, and there's 3 stats in these games, there's skill, stamina, and luck, you actually reduce your skill by 3 when you're unarmed. And if you ever find an item with the weapon tag, you get those 3 skill points back plus any bonus.
And there's a few choice paths where it will in fact actively punish you for acting like a hero.
That's right. Yeah. It'll just tell you like you've made a bad decision. Don't be an idiot. It's funny because it's almost like Steve Jackson read every horror movie trope and like said, if you do any of these stupid things that people do in horror movies, you will just immediately die.
Yep.
And it's not like you get in a fight and die. It's just paragraphs over, you're dead.
The end.
The end. And he telegraphs all the horror movie moments pretty well. There's a few red herrings where like you reach out and grab something and you probably think you shouldn't, and it's all okay. But for the most part, it's all horror movie rules, and you can die without ever rolling dice. And that was the thing that was so shocking to me, was typically when you die in fighting fantasy, you die from a fight. There's not a lot of times where it's just like you open the wrong door and the red dragon eats you. I think there's one of those in Warlock of Fartop Mountain where literally the dragon eats you for no reason. But for most of these books,
the dragon has a reason, it's hungry.
Well, it was just that you ran out of stamina and you died. You also have a fear mechanic, and the fear is a building amount. You have a tolerance basically for fear that you roll at the beginning of the game, and it's like a d6 plus 6 again. And I died from fear more than anything else in this game.
Yeah, I did 3 or 4 replays of this like about a week ago.
Yeah.
And I think one time I ran out of stamina, and every other time I died, it was from fear.
If you assume like a random fear of 9, like you have fear of 9, you get 3 fear points within like the first like maybe 25 like paragraphs.
And it's interesting because, and I haven't played the Tin Man Games version of it. Tin Man Games has an app that's just a bunch of the fighting fantasy books.
Right.
But I think in the Tin Man Games app for generating your maximum fear for House of Hell, I think it's a dice plus 9. I think it actually gives you extra points.
Gives you extra points. That makes sense because it is very easy to die from that. And it's also very easy to die from just like you go the wrong way and something kills you. Yeah. You get killed by cultists a lot in this one.
How dare you open this door or touch that thing?
Yeah. So you as you arrive, basically you go knock on the door. You got choices like peeking in the windows and stuff like that. But you arrive and you're greeted by the butler. He'll be important later on. And the first act of this is up to the inciting incident. So as you arrive at the house, you're greeted by the butler. They put you it's creepy, but like you don't think anything's wrong yet, apart from the fact that you're reading a book called House of Hell. So you should immediately be suspicious. And
I'm sure this is fine.
You end up dining with the Lord
Kellner.
Yeah. If you're lucky and you speak to a ghost in a mirror beforehand, you'll avoid drinking the white wine, which immediately like drugs you and knocks you out.
Yeah.
But if everything goes kind of well and you navigate through a few different options that could like set you up back early, you end up, being promised like some, rest and recuperation, and we'll get you a place in the morning. We don't have a telephone that works, but we'll get you on your way in the morning and you'll make your appointment or whatever. And you go to bed. They see you upstairs. So the first act is roughly maybe 20 to 25 paragraphs of like navigating the first floor. You're in the dining room. You get fed dinner. You have a wonderful dinner as long as you choose the right options and don't eat the poison food they're already trying to kill you with.
Yep.
And then you go upstairs and go to bed. And if you go to bed and everything's kind of normal, they have two things can happen. One, you can make the mistake of looking out the window. And if you look out the window, the old man that told you directions back at the gas station is just hanging from a rope outside on a tree.
As you do.
Just randomly. Like some of the horror movie logic here makes no sense. It's just haunted house
Is
logic.
it fair to say he's hanging around?
He is hanging around on a rope. Like for no reason. He has no story. There's no reason for him to be there, but it gives you 3 fear points immediately.
You want his whole story? He told you where to go. Now he's dead. That's his story.
That's it. No idea why. And then the other one is that the hunchback might creep into your room and leave you a clear drink for you to drink, which again knocks you out.
Yeah.
So you wake up all bound and gagged. So your best choice is, and what I did was immediately get up and walk around the top floor of the room. Now there are 2 things that you really need to do in this game to get through. One, you cannot beat the final boss of this game without finding the ritual sacrifice dagger called the Chris. And 2, you don't know where to fight the final boss without talking to talking to like a ghost, basically.
Yeah.
And the 2 facts require a few steps in between.
Yeah, there's a chain leading from one event to the next.
Yeah. So the first one is on the first floor. You have to talk to either the man in gray or the man in white. Why don't you explain this part?
So this is and by the first floor, it's the upper floor of the
Yeah.
house. So when the house is basically 3 levels. There's the ground floor, the upper floor, and then there's a basement.
And you start and end in the ground floor.
Yes.
With like time upstairs and time in the
You have
basement.
a very brief period of time at the start on the ground floor. Then you wake up or are led to however you end up there on the upper floor where all of the charmingly named rooms are on the upper floor.
Abaddon, Azrael.
Pick
Acheron.
an ominous angel or straight up demon name, and this is what the nameplates on all the doors are.
Yeah. The Diabolus room.
Diabolus, yeah. So you basically on the upper floor, I'm not going to count. There's about 16 rooms. And one of them, there is I keep forgetting, why is it the man in gray, the man in white? Man in gray?
Man in gray.
The man in gray, who is basically like a cultist defector. Like he was a member of their group and he's left them. So he's going to give you the first clue that leads you towards your ultimate objective. Now it's interesting. We talked about this a bit before we started recording. When I did my playthroughs of this, and there's an S on the end of that because it was multiple times.
Oh, I died 50 times.
And so what I did was I made notes. I kind of made a map, which was very crappy. So that I didn't have to redo bad choices, basically.
Yeah, I scum saved. I would scum save at paragraphs basically where I knew I had just unlocked something important. So like, for instance, when I interrogate the old woman and discover that, like I beat up her hounds and then discover that if I threaten her herb garden, she'll tell me whatever I want to know. She tells you a secret and they mechanically lock certain things behind a math equation. So like one of the secret doors you need to look for, when you're in the right spot that she tells you to be in, she says, subtract 10 from the paragraph number.
You got it.
And you'll find this
So you don't
thing.
guess your way through it.
Exactly. You can't just guess.
But one of the things I did after my multiple playthroughs was I went online and I found a map, like the whole house already mapped out. Because my curiosity was, can I literally go from point A to point B to point C and not fight or have all these? Because again, typically what's happening is you're just being frightened to death. Mm-hmm. You open the wrong door, you look at the wrong thing, you talk to the wrong ghost. Which is weird because there's right ghosts and wrong ghosts.
Yeah, there's like the ghosts of people that are wrong and the ghosts of people that are like, yeah, this place is the best. I'm in Ghost Town.
Come hang out in Ghost Town with me.
Right.
I know how to get you there.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, so you go see the man in gray and he gives you your first clue that there's shenanigans going on downstairs and you need to check out those shenanigans. So once you get to that point, either quickly or more likely if you're playing it like a traditional game book role-playing game where you're exploring rooms as you go, and somehow you manage to survive long enough doing that. Once you get there, you're going to start going downstairs now.
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is that the top floor is where it really starts to be clear that this is a haunted house. This, like, you have one kind of narrative thread through the story that is the master of the house is evil. He's going to end the world with an evil ritual. But then he seems to have collected literally the entire Warner monster gallery in his house. There's a vampire, there's a witch, there's a zombie, there's literally one of every. It's like he collected one of every monster in here.
It's funny because it feels like this book might have been what they effectively wanted the endpoint of that Tom Cruise Universal monster movie thing they were trying to launch to end up being, basically.
And my argument is they didn't need to do any of that, and it would have been just fine being a creepy, mostly empty, haunted house. But for some reason, they needed to fit every single monster movie thing in here. And to my 8-year-old brain, that was the coolest shit ever.
Oh, it's great.
There's gonna be one of these things.
Yeah, it was.
I get it. He's a vampire. It was me trying to figure out what they're telegraphing in any given scene. The hypnotic eyes of the stranger that turns around, you're like, oh shit, don't go near him. But if you look in his eyes, he immediately kills you with no roll.
Whatever your favorite professional sport is, I can guarantee you that the all-star game for that sport is meaningless, but you still love it every time you watch it. Yeah. And this is that as a horror novel. Yeah,
you get everything. Everything from the Hunchback to cultists and as
goat-headed cultists. Don't shortchange these guys.
Wearing actual
don't change these.
But what's funny is it's really only on the top floor of the house that they do that it's a monster mash.
Once you get downstairs, as soon as you get
to the basement, it
starts
cult.
to get very thematic.
Yeah.
It feels more Lovecraft once you get down to the main floor in the basement.
And it feels like, because this was released in 2 parts, it was released as a 200 paragraph thing in Warlock Magazine.
Yeah.
And then as a full book later
400 entry book, yeah.
It almost feels like all that monster movie shit is the tacked on stuff to pad it out. That would be I don't know that that's the case, but everything that's not the hell cultist demon Lovecraftian stuff feels like it is there to increase the paragraph count. And I think that backs up your argument where you can just go straight to the man in gray and then leave the upper floor, and the upper floor never matters again.
No. It's interesting though, because it's, I jokingly excessively use the phrase as was the style at the time. But when you looked at adventure writing in the early 80s, for traditional role-playing adventures, there was no ecology of an environment, right?
Sure.
An environment, it was literally just picking different cool things.
Yeah.
And most fighting fantasy books are like that. You have all these different things that they don't necessarily make sense hanging out in the same space.
Isn't the most
together.
famous fight in Keeping the Borderlands against an owl bear, which has nothing to do with Keeps or Borderlands?
Yes.
That's the most famous encounter in Keeping the Borderlands.
It wasn't really until I would say 86 that adventures started being a little more tightly themed around what was in them. So was this padded on, or was this literally the style at the time? Not sure.
Yeah,
but either way, I enjoyed it.
Oh, I never read the Warlock Magazine version, but I'd be very interested to know which of the 2 parts of that are in there.
Oh, I wish I could find that. I know I have it. It was the first.
Oh, they're on eBay. You can find them. They are.
No, but I mean, I have one in my house somewhere.
I almost pulled the trigger when we did Fighting Fantasy on a 5-issue collection somebody had of it's not 1, 2, 3. It's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or something like that. Yeah. But it was $150, and I was just
Well, even I think
only I ever will care.
I think the one with House of Hell in it was the first one that got sold in North America, if I remember right. And it was issue 11. There's a ton of them.
Oh no, I know. Yeah. It goes forever. But it's funny how I feel like this, but you can almost feel the parts of this book that are superficial because they don't interfere with, like you said, the main walk.
We're back to our tangents have tangents, aren't we?
No, we're just talking about structure, which is fine. So that's Act 1, the inciting incident. You get kind of quasi kidnapped, maybe drugged, wake up on the top floor, encounter the bits you need to know that you need to go to the basement. You need to find a secret room that the master lives in.
It's where you get your call to action.
That's right. And you end up, there's a couple ways to get to the basement, but the one that I always took was go to where you're actually going to end the game, which is the dining room. Where you've just eaten with the master of the house, who's a real Vincent Pricey sort of, you know what? He always, who his drawing always remind me of? And I don't know how it looks in the new one. He looks like Timothy Dalton to me. He looks like Timothy Dalton in Hot Fuzz.
So I love Timothy Dalton.
I know you do. He was the Psycho Bond.
My first thought was slightly thicker hair, but Peter Cushing.
Oh yeah, Peter Cushing. Yeah. Like an evil Dracula or Abraham Van Helsing. Peter Cushing from Dracula. Yeah, because Peter Cushing, he wasn't just Grand Moff Tarkin. He was also Van Helsing.
Yes, yeah. For everybody who didn't know Peter Cushing existed before 1977. Yes.
So, or because he was the wargaming champion of our time. He was the previous. Peter Cushing is what's his name is what Superman is today. What's that guy's name?
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill. What Henry Cavill was for today, Peter Cushing was for wargaming of yesteryear. So you end up in the dining room. And there's a bunch of weird kind of contraptions. You end up fighting these weird fire sprites that spirits that leap out of the fireplace. You can find a bottle of brandy, but there's a secret button that if you push it, apparently there's a trap there the master laid to dump people into his murder basement.
Yep.
Well, you push it, you immediately fall into the basement. That's how I always end up a pile of hay. And then in comes wandering our second, I think, has to happen encounter, which is you meet the Hunchback.
Shiku.
Sheku, I think his name is Shiku.
Oddly enough, that's not a word I've seen spelled out phonetically before,
No,
so.
you give him, I've never said it out loud. You give him some brandy, get him drunk, and he starts telling you all about the master and his friends or whatever. You convince him that you're one of his friends. And he tells you all about the way to get into the secret password that gets you into the room under the stairs leading back upstairs. And that's the master's secret room where all the secret stuff is. Once you find that room, you can continue down the hallways. There's a couple moments where you might just immediately die again.
Yep.
There's a couple paragraphs you just walk into a room and cultists just jump you. There's one incredibly frustrating moment where if you walk into a room with a torturer in it, because there's a torture chamber down there, you have to go through the world's most elaborate guessing game where all the cultists give you a letter and you write a word down that has something to do with the house. Basically, you have to write down the nameplates of all the doors and the
or
top
characters
floor.
that you've encountered. It's one of those weird. So this is the one moment where it rewards you for having explored the house previously.
Yeah,
because it's the only time that you get anything out of having done that.
It's also completely optional, and even if you talk your way out of that and get the guessing game right, you still die. Yeah. It's so stupid. You die no matter what. Like you die every time because you spend too much time there. And then
really
the
just a
cultists
metaphor
come
for
and grab
life,
you.
man.
Yeah,
it's just a metaphor.
There's one fight where you fight through a bunch of dogs in a kennel, and then you win, and then you go to fight the other dogs, and then you die. Or if you test your luck and you're lucky, you still die. Like there's a bunch of like just dead ends in the basement.
Didn't Body Count have a song about this? The winner loses.
Yeah. You eventually find the secret room. The secret room has a box in it. The box has the Christ knife, the sacrificial knife. So you have part one of what you need to fight with. You also discover talking to Sheku, or not Sheku, talking to
this is one of the prisoners, I think, in the murder dungeon.
Yeah, you go into the murder dungeon and there's a bunch of prisoners. You're talking to the prisoners. He knows they're all going to die. Says, don't try and save us. Because if you try and save them, any of them, you immediately die.
The prisoners, much like the ghosts, there's the right prisoner and the wrong prisoners.
Yeah. All the prisoners you talk to, except for one, you end up dying if you talk to them because the cultists pile in and kill you. And there's literally no way to know. Like whatsoever, there's no way to know.
It's just a guess.
It's a complete guess. There's no like logicking your way through it. If you pick one of the three right prisoners, then you.
I love the almost catfishing sense of it too, because like if you pick a couple of the wrong ones, you get like a couple options after that. Like it leads you down a little path.
Oh yeah, that's the most frustrating part.
Right. Everything's fine.
Yeah,
fine,
you have like a whole conversation with them. You test your luck. You like do something, offer them something, and then cultists come and kill you. Like there's a bunch of like, and then you died. Like you just like they gave up on whatever the plot thread was there. Yeah, there's a bunch of weird tones.
Oh, we're almost maxed out on entries.
And it was very frustrating. Or they didn't max out on entries, and so they needed a couple more entries, and then you died.
I got to be honest, again, being an old school role player of that time, as frustrating as those outcomes could be, I really enjoyed it. Because this felt more to me like a D&D module or a Call of Cthulhu module of its time than most of the other fighting fantasy.
Because it was so lethal. We'll get to that at the end when we talk about themes, because there's a very recurrent theme in here that as a young person I absorbed. And yeah, you discover you have to fight him in a red room to symbolize when you fight the master of the house, you have to fight him in a red room. It symbolizes the battle in hell to defeat this demon or whatever. There's a very narrow window after this conversation to get out of the basement without immediately being killed by cultists. How did you navigate that part?
I don't remember, because by that point I'd played it so many times.
Because that's how you get to the kitchen, right?
Yeah, because it basically it directs you. I'm trying to think. You leave the room with the prisoners in it,
and then you get to the stairs, and that's where you go under the stairs. If you keep exploring the room under the stairs, you find another room with another box, which is a total catfish because it has a cool potion in it. And if you open the potion, it's a genie who kills you.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things that when you get to that whole, and it's funny because the tagline for fighting fantasy books, right, is "You are the hero." This is that endless reminder. You are not. You're not a hero.
No,
your goal is to survive this and see the sunrise. Your goal is not to explore every nook and cranny, open every box.
You're not here to kill the world like a part-time man. You're here to get the hell out of the house and get to your appointment.
I would like to get to my appointment.
Whatever my appointment, they never tell you what your appointment is, but it's the most important thing in your life.
I like to think, like having gone through the whole book, that your appointment is to see a psychologist about your paranoia and anxiety.
I like to think that it's to buy.
Doc, I know you think it's in my head, but you're not going to believe what happened to me last night.
He's got a tip on Apple stock. That's all it is. He's like, this Apple thing in California is going to be huge. I'm going to buy 10,000 Apple shares for $11, and my children's children will be wealthy.
You're an idiot, man. I put all my money in Atari.
I put all my money in Texas Instruments. So you make it out. You get to the kitchen, and then, like you said, there's another window where you might immediately die. What was that?
So again, you're trying to escape from the house. There's a locked back door, and there's a key ring hanging next to the door.
And no matter what you do,
and I'm trying to
Such a
remember.
red
I kept meaning to go back and reread it. So the keys, I think, are hanging over the stove.
they're red hot.
They're red hot. So basically, no matter what happens, and it's funny because again, this is one of those things you're talking about where there's a path you go down, right? Like if you touch the keys, you either take
Scream.
both. Well, you scream, but you take both stamina and skill damage from hurting your.
Oh,
hand.
that's right. You test your luck.
But then if you test your luck, you just take like one stamina point, drop the keys, and everything's fine except you're dead.
And then the next entry is, and then someone hurt you and you die.
Yeah.
So like there's this whole chain of events where like you're recording damage and testing your luck and seeing if you're lucky or not. But then the same outcome is the next paragraph after that, the cultist heard you scream. And
But
they
also
shove
you're
and
dead.
kill you. Yeah.
Yes.
A bunch of goat-headed cultists club you and you die. You eventually end up back in the dining room and you have a confrontation now armed with the crysknife with the master of the house and the butler.
Well, yes.
And you have to choose which one you want to fight. And this is the next one where it's like a complete red herring and a coin flip.
Let's flip the coin. Yeah.
If you fight the master first, you have a little fight and then immediately die. And if you fight the butler first, you strike. He first starts running away from you, and the master's like, "No, kill him! Seize him, butler!" And then you strike him once, and he immediately turns into
a bloodthirster.
A bloodthirster, basically a giant, huge Balrogi demon that you have to fight. It just asks you if you have the crysknife already, and if you do, you get to have a fight, and if you don't, you die immediately. And as soon as you kill the demon, the master of the house is engulfed in flames. He runs over and hugs it, also is engulfed in flames. And you're like, fuck us, I'm out. And you just leave. And you just walk out the front door and watch the house burn down. And the last line of it is so friggin', it's fantastic. The paragraph 400 in
Peace
this
out,
is,
demons.
A fitting end, you think, for a house of hell. I want to know if the US one said a fitting end, I think, for a house of Hades. If they rewrote the final line.
I wish
or
I
not.
could have found mine.
Yeah, me too. And so there we go. We've charted our course through. I love that somebody made a map for this. I think that's so cool. I love whenever anyone takes these fighting fantasy books so seriously, they chart it out because they do make a great D&D adventure. Like we could literally run House of Hell as
100%.
an RPG.
Yeah, 100%.
You could ditch 90% of the like creature feature stuff that's in here and still have an incredible story.
And I would say the map that this is just a guy who played through the books that this guy created is objectively a better map of a modern house than most maps you get in RPG products that are meant to be set in modern houses.
It looks like it would actually fit together, which is the cool
Yes.
thing. Like it actually looks like this could be a real house, a real like.
It doesn't have
manor
weird
house.
gaming logic to it.
No.
It just is a house.
It is a house. It's just a house. And what's really neat is in my head, as I played through this again, and I realized it does feel a bit stitched together. Like it does feel like it was made one way and then kind of like Frankenstein, is our movie reference, with like extra bits onto it that did feel kind of superfluous, like you said. I was thinking about all the cool ways you could redo this in a more modern gaming mentality. Like you could have the fear mechanic and even have something chasing you through the house the whole time. Like how do you make this game where you're being hunted through this house and you replace the fear mechanic with like a stealth mechanic where like you're building up like being followed points and things attack you.
Yeah, so even like if you flip it a little bit, the fear mechanic in this, if you wanted to do it as an RPG, if you used any version of Call of Cthulhu, so whether it was...
It's sanity points.
It's sanity points, yeah. So whether you use Call of Cthulhu or if you want to do it modern, you did Delta Green, whatever.
Yeah, it's just it's a depleting supply instead of a accruing tolerance, basically.
Yes.
But it's so well done, and especially considering how raw the format is still. This is their 10th book, and they've only really written one together and then 4 more each separately.
You got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they're not experts at this yet.
Everything you see, Warlock of Firetop Mountain is like this, and then everything you see pretty much after this, your nameplate on it is Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone present. The first 10... The book is either crediting Steve Jackson or Ian Livingstone as the author.
Yeah.
And there are some exceptions further down the line, but yeah.
It's really neat to read this one. One, because it's such a huge format departure. It's a big chance Jackson takes with this one.
Yep.
And two, this is the most ripe for the Satanic Panic game.
Yes.
Right? Because you're a regular Joe Schmo encountering Satanists in the English countryside. Let's do that for fun, kids.
Well, and the funny thing is because they never I mean, because it's a fighting fantasy book, you know it's the English countryside, but because they never reference it being in the UK,
Of course.
it also feels like it could be anywhere in the American Midwest.
Absolutely. It could be
anywhere
Resident Evil.
where
It could
towns
be
are a
Resident Evil
distance
7.
apart,
Like it
right?
could be anything. Like
Yeah.
where you're fighting, where it's Jack in Resident Evil 7 in his decrepit
So
Louisiana.
this
mansion.
could literally be the fear of everybody who was driving the Satanic Panic
It's
at the
real
time.
easy to insert yourself into the
I
scene.
get one
or
step off the
whatever.
beaten path, and there's Satanists everywhere.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And they're lurking in the shadows, ready to attack us all. That poor old man from the gas station, man, they just hung him up from a rope for no reason to please their butler master. I don't know why the butler was the team. It's so weird.
Just for a twist.
Just for a twist.
Just for a twist.
There's a weird like end twist in this whole thing. So
There's the Rod Serling, M. Night Shyamalan moment.
that's it. Yeah. So as we I guess leave the ground floor, we walk into the living room, and we find there's paintings on the walls. There's all kinds of, I guess, the collection of artwork of the master of the house. And also weirdly a gift shop. He's like a roadside attraction house of hell, I guess. They got like a little.
How are you going to pay for all those goat head masks?
Yeah, I mean, well,
That's not free, man.
there's
That's
a lot.
not free.
There's a lot of people in this
I don't
house.
see goats just wandering
Like,
around the
there's-
countryside. You got to pay for those goat heads.
There's like a bag of holding level of tenancy here. I don't know where all those goat-headed cultists are living. Are they just sleeping in the hay pile I fell in later?
Well, now you know why there's so many bedrooms upstairs.
Anyway, so we have to decide: are we going to go into the art exposition, or are we going to go down to the House of Hell gift shop?
Gallery to the left, gift shop to the right. Have your tickets ready for the Dark Exhibition.
All right, so this is the Dark Exhibition. This is where we talk about whether or not this is art or product from the point of view of where it's at kind of in like the product design cycle or life cycle of things being created by these two authors. And again, this isn't a value judgment. Something's not necessarily good because it's art. It's not necessarily bad because it's product. It's just where do we think this falls? Because that kind of helps inform where the person was at when they were making it and how I felt consuming it. So where did this land for you?
So I'm going to split this answer into two parts. Why is this always the part that one of us has to be difficult about?
Because that's just our contrarian nature.
So I'm going to answer the actual question, which is where did we think it fell when the person created it? And from that point of view, I'm going to firmly land it in art for a couple of reasons. The first one is that, again, the thing I think I have the most respect for Steve Jackson with the fighting fantasy books for is they had this unbelievably successful format. It was very popular. They could just grind these books out. But it literally felt like every single book he put out, he was driven to insert something new, to take what was already successful and try something new mechanically, try something new thematically. In this case, both.
He never nailed it down. He never once nailed it down the way that Ian Livingstone did.
And it seemed like it was this endless quest to decide what you could do differently.
Yeah.
So as much as they had something that by book 10 was definitely a commercial success, was definitely product to be consumed by people.
And one of them's driving it that way too. One of them's codifying everything. One of them's drawing the maps of Valencia and writing the history of the countries and stuff.
But to me, at time of writing by the author and the art team, this is art. Now, this is my step back a second. So I'm saying art. The answer is art.
Sure.
So I mentioned before, this is one of the books that has been reissued under the Scholastic line.
Right.
So the Scholastic line has been hot and cold with people that are buying them out of a sense of nostalgia, older people like me, because they have done they've redone all the interior art, which by the way is a weird choice.
I don't think it's a choice necessarily though too. They might not own a lot of it anymore. And a lot of incredibly famous artists.
What I mean about a choice though,
books.
is they've just redone all the existing art pieces. They haven't created art pieces based off different entries. So when you have...
Oh, it looks like someone copied somebody else's
so when
art.
you have an older version of the book and the new version of the book, if it's got, I don't know how many it has. If it has 16 art pieces, it's the same 16 art pieces redone.
Right.
So I mentioned earlier when we were talking about, I forget what we were talking about. It was the Lord Kellner, the vampire.
Yeah.
That I was going to have a thing that I was going to like rag on the new book about. So whoever got the art assignment for this.
Okay.
We talked before about not reading your homework all the way or copying somebody. The picture of the vampire, he didn't get that was a different character.
Oh no! So he's just the same guy as the master?
It is Lord Kellner. Oh, I should have bookmarked this.
Oh no!
So I'm going to show because they're and the funny thing is you don't flip through these books in order, but if you did, they are two consecutive art pieces in this book. So that is the Lord.
Yeah.
And that other page I have marked, that's the vampire.
Oh, they're literally just the same person.
It's the same outfit. It's the same highlighting from the light in the
Oh, it's
hair.
been done digitally. That's why.
Yeah.
They've just copied and pasted the head. Oh my God, it's just.
But it's not just the head. It's everything. It's the same outfit. It's the same jacket. It's the same shirt.
It's a concept artist. Oh my God. Yeah, this is the problem with digital art. Is this has been done digitally?
So I will say,
it's just copied and pasted the head.
Steve Jackson, original Fighting Fantasy team.
Yeah.
Art. Scholastic team.
Product.
Hardcore
product. Well, and that's funny. That's funny how that proves that over time,
when we talk about that evolution
happens. That's really interesting.
Because I bought, as a customer, right, as a consumer, I bought a book I clearly didn't need to buy because I had nostalgia for it.
What's the publishing date on that? How many years apart are they, I guess, is my question. Maybe in the front cover, probably.
This is from like a year ago.
Okay, so like we're talking like a 2020, 2021 publishing date. So it's 35 years later, almost 40 years later. So
this is meant, all the credits are 2017. That's weird.
There you go. Okay. So, but either way, 30 years apart.
But this is
that's turned into a product.
This is meant to appeal to people our age who don't have their original copy, right? Like, which is fine. Like, that's cool. But yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah. Stop copying your neighbor's homework.
That's really funny. How well, and showing the transition, right? So like why that taking it temporally and having it be different, like having the cover art be different, having the interior art be different, show like it is a different piece of media. Absolutely. You are looking at a different piece of media.
But the funny thing is, they didn't. If you look at the cover, it's not like it's a Scholastic book, and it's not like they shied away.
No, they went with Tim Curry.
Yeah,
they got Tim Curry on the cover there. I actually like that cover better because it has the house on it. This one's, I mean, the Ian Miller one. It's got Ian Miller trees.
And stylistically, I don't actually dislike the art that's in this book. But that was the moment when I was flipping through it. I'm like, you just let the air out of the tires. That was worse than all the catfishing in the story.
No, they got like a Fiverr young adult artist to do the art in that book.
But to go back to where I started, I'm saying art.
That's fair enough. I'm completely with you. Like, and mostly because I think Jackson wrote this one. Being 5 books in and having made a different choice every single time and try to include a new mechanic every single time, you could tell the difference between Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson's minds by looking at their books as they wrote them going downtown through the different like eras.
And again, by no means is that a qualitative statement.
No, of course not.
It's like one of the things, like the thing that Ian Livingstone did building up that universe is fantastic. I love that to this day. I love every part of that to this day. Steve Jackson deciding that was a chassis to build other things onto. I love that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of them just going different directions with it. So then we've exited. We've just completely ignored this gift shop. I'll be honest. I wouldn't want to buy any goat heads. Like there's a lot of goat heads in there.
I feel like if I bought a goat head like around entry number 1, I would have done better every time the cult.
Entirely possible. A lot of wavy knives.
Should have bought a goat head.
A lot of wavy knives. A lot of white wine with like.
When could you not say that about your life though? You should have bought the goat head.
Don't drink the white wine ever because the white wine's full of roofies. Just swimming. Like there's not even dissolved. They're just floating in the white wine. A lot of box wine.
I'll take 1 Miller Lite and 1 Roofie Colada.
And 1 Roofie Colada, please. So we're gonna exit now. And as the goat-headed cultists start to drag us off to their local sanitarium as we rant and rave.
I did nothing wrong. Why did you find me?
I murdered the butler. They find us covered in butler blood.
Which, for the record, not a crime. Killing a butler.
That's true.
Not a crime.
As we go by the swinging corpse of the old man from the gas station, we find ourselves dragged off to the Grim Asylum.
As night descends, we scratch our messages into the walls. Future warnings for inmates of the Grim Asylum.
All right, so the Grim Asylum is where we start to discuss themes and why this is or isn't something that was kind of strongly echoes that grimdark feeling to us. We've identified tons of themes, and you can go up in the cards and check out our original episode of what is grimdark, like what defines grimdark. To us, all the themes don't have to be there, but when we pick a piece of media for this or have it picked by the patrons, this is why it's here, as we felt like these existed. So for House of Hell, I have a real hard time not separating the fact that this was a childhood experience for me. It has themes of cannibalism, Satanism, demon worship, human sacrifice, vampirism, black magic, curses, life after death.
This is the best Tenacious D album you could possibly read as a novel.
It is metal liner notes wrapped in an Ian Miller weird tree cover. Like, the Ian Miller trees on the cover alone should be enough to give like 8-year-old me nightmares. And I bought this at a school book fair. This is being written for Puffin, which is the Penguin Books kids imprint. If you want to know that this is designed to be aimed at children, it's not a Penguin book. It's a Puffin book, which means it is a Scholastic Book Fair book. These are right alongside like the Nancy Drew Choose Your Own Adventures and the Babysitters Club shit at your local public library. And it's House of Hell.
Hey, sometimes Geronimo Stilton goes into the wrong house.
So,
that's all I'm saying.
So for my first, and I've got 3 themes here that I picked as my recurrent themes. The first one, and this is of course setting wise, is going to be the idea of subversion, of the fact that you are basically allowing kids to in a children's book to experience a horror movie. And this is something that maybe isn't a contemporary experience today, but I don't know if you shared this the way I did. Horror movies were one of the most talked about things on the schoolyard when I was this age.
Yep.
Because they were taboo.
It is the forbidden fruit.
It is. It was a thing that your older friends, siblings, aunts, uncles talked about, that they kind of like stopped talking about when you came into the room, that you would like beg them to tell you the story about. And then that information of like what Freddy Krueger was doing, that got traded around the schoolyard like cred.
There was a certain stage where you were talking about the secret stash that some older relative had, and that secret stash was just VHS horror movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't any of the real
and what the crazy
stuff
twists were like, no, it was Jason's mom. Jason's not even in the movie. It was Jason's mom who was the killer the whole time. Or like Michael, it's his brother. She's the brother and sister. That's why he's always hunting her. Like all of that stuff became like street cred.
Yep.
And so to have a book in my like library, my school library that I could read and then I could buy at the school book fair that was just that in book form, that it felt subversive. It felt like something I shouldn't have. It felt like something that I shouldn't have access to at that age. And that was like the coolest. It's that same like punk rock feeling that I had when I bought, like I said, my Slaves to Darkness, and I had a parental advisory on the cover. It's the same as like buying like an NWA album where there's like all of these like parental advisory logos on the cover that like you shouldn't own these things.
The National Wrestling Alliance had albums?
They didn't.
You're gonna have to revisit the 80s.
Different album. So for me, that whole like feeling of like, no, this is subversive material. And it's being written for kids by an adult that thinks that it's okay that I know this. Yep. That was the coolest thematic thing about it, is it felt like, and it wasn't softened. Like you didn't like, the descriptions were gory and gross. And some of the illustrations were creepy and weird. And like, you didn't feel like someone was giving you the diet version of Sleepaway Camp. Like it was just there, and that's it. And like, when you look at the cover of this, man, it by itself is enough to tell you what you're getting on the inside, and it doesn't disappoint.
No, and the funny thing is, I actually find that original cover to be less, I don't know how to put it, sketchy and off-putting than any of the interior art. Like the interior art, like goes hard.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And mostly because it's about like, I think it was maybe the first time, because this is something I found with Lovecraft later on when I was maybe 10 or 11, is the banality of evil. Is that something so banal and mundane as a house, or a guy's engaging in cannibalism, and a guy just out for a hike encounters it. And I immediately had House of Hell vibes from that sort of like that thing. I had House of Hell vibes when I played Resident Evil 7, which is the one where you are just a guy looking for his wife in this like Louisiana backcountry manor, basically. And the people are banal. Like the bad guy, Jack, in that game is just an old balding guy with a shovel.
Yep.
But he's infected with like some kind of crazy, well, I don't spoil it all, but he's a bad guy. and so that subversiveness and the fact that like you took kind of the everyday and the mundane, that was really my first time encountering it. Yeah. And it really stuck with me.
So I went right past setting, and I went into the things that, again, when I was young reading it for the first time, that I felt about what was happening. And the first one I went with, and it's going to seem cheap and lazy, but I went with death. And I went with death for 2 reasons. The first one for me is death is literally around every corner. Like
you die constantly.
For you as the player.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like if you were to yell it out loud and an adult was walking by, you'd probably just get the head shake. It's like you can do nothing wrong and you still die.
Yeah.
Like just bad things happen.
And they even like take you like 3 or more paragraphs down the road and you still die.
So that was part of it. The other part of it for me was, especially in the first part, you have a lot of interactions with ghosts. And the good ghosts, the right ghosts, it's all about how no one deserves what they're going to experience. And they didn't deserve what they're going to experience. And it's not presented in an overly descriptively dark way, but there is this sense that you're talking to a bunch of people who are dead, who didn't deserve to die and didn't need to die.
It's funny how that comes up in media later on. Like the Black Phone is all about that.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like, but this is an early example, especially written for kids.
But it addressed death in 2 completely different ways, but that were omnipresent throughout the whole story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's funny, like, and they specifically put more death in this book than almost any other fighting fantasy book, which I think is like just a crazy act to do with a children's publisher. The fact that this got through the publisher, I think, is like just a testimony in and of itself.
You got to wonder, do you get to a point where you've sold so many books that everybody's like, yeah, whatever, I'm sure it's great.
They're just rubber stamping the whole thing.
Just print it, get it on the shelves.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Could you imagine? Yeah, that's a whole other story. We, like you and I talked about when we talked about our early GW fighting fantasy stuff, but like being those guys and just being on this train of success must have been just nuts at the time. So my second thing then, and this is I guess this is like a tonal thing, an emotional thing, but obviously it's fear. They tried to bake fear into the mechanics. And while I never found this scary, it was more illicit, the feeling that I got. You could tell that the goal was to make you understand that you're alone, you can die at any time, and that there was like a tension there. So by putting in that death mechanic, and this is the way I came at it, you felt this was the one where you had to hold your fingers between more paragraphs than damn near any other
5-finger bookmark, baby.
Because you just die. You just die. And I said I scum saved earlier. What I did, I scum save at any point where I found like what I knew was a key item. I would scum save there by writing the paragraph down because I knew that if I didn't, I could literally just die.
Yeah.
Like you could literally, like you said, walk around the corner. And because I think the clever trick they do is because they would allow like certain decisions to go like 2 to 3 more steps and make you think you're okay. Like I tested my luck and I got lucky and I only took a little bit more damage from the keys, but then I instantly die. You never felt like any flip was safe.
I actually watched a guy do a playthrough online, and it was funny because basically he's got all these people in his chat, and he's like, okay, first thing that gets 5 votes, that's the choice we make.
Sure.
And he dies at some point, and it was a good time. Like he was really good presenter, but he dies. And then as he starts the second playthrough, there's an item they found the first time, and he's like, okay, we got to get that again. And he gets this sudden panic reaction that he doesn't remember where it is, and because he's running the stream and doing all these other things, he can't remember. He made no notes, and he's like, we got to find that, and we're not even going to make it past the midway point in the book. And it's funny because you're watching it as a practical application in terms of him trying to shoot content to post on YouTube. But it's the same moment you would have as a kid if you were just flipping through it like it was a choose your own adventure book. You just wasted 45 minutes and not keeping track of what you were doing.
Yeah. And so it didn't like, I know fear is the goal, but the feeling I felt is the reader's tension, which is the same sort of thing. It's a fear of like missing out and not being able to keep moving forward. But this actually does that really well with those like few little magic tricks of even you think it's going to be okay and then it still isn't. And that almost felt like it was a trick to get you to take your fingers out of the page.
Yep.
Right? Like, and then die. Like that was almost a writing trick Jackson was doing to get you to not scum save, but then have to go back to the beginning and start over again. And it's really clever and it's good game design. And it's baked into that like fear and mechanical, like bad choice, good choice system. So this was definitely the one. It actually is probably one of the shortest books.
Yeah.
If you just go right to the end and play through it, like you could probably finish this book. Like to finish Warlock is probably a good like 2-3 hours.
Yeah. If you speed run this, it's not long at all.
40 minutes, maybe like 40 minutes. Cause a lot of it is the gimmick of like the exploration stuff that once you play it a couple times, you just know where to go and you can finish it probably like in under an hour. All right, so what's your second one?
So it's funny because my second one is also fear, but I picked it for a very different reason than you did. I don't disagree with anything you said, but for me, one of the challenges of any piece of media, so it doesn't matter if it's an interactive piece of media like a game, if it's just a novel that you're reading, if it's a movie that you're watching, is the reason why jump scares have gotten so popular is because they're visceral enough that you do feel them no matter what your personal setting is. Mm-hmm. But when you're absorbing traditional horror media, it's really hard to separate yourself from the fact that you are sitting comfortably in your living room drinking a Coke, or, in your bedroom with the light on reading a book, or with a PlayStation controller in your hand controlling your character's actions. You're divorced from a lot of what it's trying to make you feel emotionally. Mm-hmm. So the reason fear came back into it for me, I thought the idea of putting a game mechanic in that forced you to basically have an experience, even if it's just mathematically, where you have to be aware of what your character is experiencing, right? You know your fear is a finite resource, and you're watching the gauge climb. And as a player, again, you're becoming very aware of the fact, this could kill me, this is bad, this is dire. But it takes you out of the fact that you're sitting in your living room, you're sitting in your basement, you're sitting in your bedroom. And it makes you feel it in a different way. Like, it makes you feel it in a game mechanics way, but it really puts that into the real world.
I think what's funny with the fear mechanic is the skill, stamina, and luck mechanic are all based on the RNG. They're all based about whatever you roll. Mm-hmm. The fear mechanic's the only one that's purely based on, did you make a good choice or a bad choice? Did you make a horror movie choice and screw up and you accumulated a bunch of fear? Or did you not and made the wise choice and picked the correct path? And so a death from the fear mechanic almost feels more visceral because you're ultimately responsible for that choice, and you walked into that stuff.
If you did what a hero would do, you're going to be reminded that you're not a hero.
You're not a hero, you're a regular.
And if you do what you would do in the real world, faced with this as a real situation, you might survive. Mm-hmm. And it does a great job of making you experience that.
Mm-hmm. So my last one is, I don't know if the author can actually take credit for this, but it's incomprehensibility. And I don't know if this is intentional or if it's just the way that this has been made in such a scattershot jambalaya of horror movie trope stuff. But the fact that there's no story is part of what made this such a recurrently thought about piece of media for me as a kid. The fact that we never really know what our mustache twirling cultists and evil man want. The fact that we don't really know what the ritual is supposed to do. There's no monologuing. There's no real why are all these monsters in this house? Who is this old woman in bed with all these flowers? There's not a ton of exposition. No. And a lot of the high fantasy stuff in this series has a lot of exposition because you're in a different world. You're not in your own world. You're in some fantasy world where the only way to give you exposition is by writing it down because it's a piece of literary media, right? In this one, because it's set in our own world, a bunch of presposition is just the fact that you know what a telephone is. You don't have to explain any of this stuff. And the fact that they don't monologue their intent, to me, was really ominous. I could insert whatever I wanted their motivations to be because all I'm seeing is the outcome. And that actually is the minimalist storytelling. That actually made me fall in love with that minimalist horror in the future in my life. I love Under the Skin and The Witch and Hereditary, where I'm just naming A24 movies because they're probably the best examples of the last few years. Also, I haven't got my A24 Green Knight box set yet, but it's coming soon. The fact that you when you're left to your own devices will insert far creepier stuff.
Yeah, we've touched on this before. This is the trope of old school horror. The limitation of horror media, let's say pre-1960, is that you couldn't be graphic and descriptive because the censors would stop you, whether it was movies or books. Your book wouldn't get published. Your movie wouldn't get made. It wouldn't get distributed. We would get the dreaded X rating, right? But what everybody found was when they were making movies that way, your brain filled in far worse things.
100%.
Whatever the terrible thing the author, the director, the whatever was picturing, your brain made something way worse out of it. And that's why it made it darker and more ominous.
I think that's why those more limited movies are so enduring.
Yeah.
Right? Is because They didn't rely. It's relying on your own inherent fear of the unknown, which is a very Lovecraftian thing, right? The greatest fear is fear of the unknown, and that infinite black around the little island of light is, I think, the sort of like the starting off point of my fascination with this kind of media, is because it has that obfuscation of like intent and purpose, so that my young mind can invent whatever I want. I mean, at the time, nothing of any substance, but as time goes on, that's, I think, why I like that kind of media, because I will come up with far more malevolent shit in my head than anyone can ever tell me. And I'm always disappointed when I find out the answer if they end up monologuing it, because it's never as good as leaving it unknown. What's your third one?
So my third one, and this is going to feel weird because there's a way to win the book, but my third one was hopelessness. So when we did our original talking about things that are grimdark, one of the ones that I mentioned as grimdark to me, even though people wouldn't traditionally think about it this way, was Assault on Precinct 13.
Right.
And it's that whole idea that there's a world of normalcy outside, but that's not your world. And this is the same thing. It's not just that you're physically trapped inside the house. It's you have no way of getting from where the house is to where the world is normal. So
desert island. Yeah. There's an ocean in between.
It very much feels like you're trapped on that desert island. The other thing is, because again, what you touched on earlier, the fact that there's no exposition and there's no monologuing, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no way for your rational mind to say, well, if I do this, this, and this, I can get out of here, or I can talk my way out of here, or I can do whatever.
Unpredictable. Yeah.
Like the fact that as you're running through the book, you just open the wrong door and you die. You just look at the wrong thing and you die. You just touch the wrong thing and you die. It's not just that can be frustrating. It's that there's a sense that there is no dawn coming.
You lose your agency.
This is the whole world, and there's nothing beyond it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, I mean, we're talking about a piece of children's media that was written now 40 years ago. So this is the 40th anniversary of House of Hell to date this. And those are themes we can still pick out of a piece of children's media, I think is pretty telling. So it's time to then, I guess, as we are let loose from the sanitarium, we have to wander in the dark and try and figure out how to get back to our broken down car. When we arrive, it's covered in goat head skulls. They've just stacked all their masks as they fled the burning building.
See, that's how I know that we're being successful, right? Because the budget's gone up. Like before, it was just whatever skulls we could find. Now we got a specific stack of goat head skulls.
We had Malamute ones for this thing. It's everywhere. Now we got goat heads. We got full horned Anton LaVey goat heads.
Nice, Anton LaVey.
All right, so where does this piece of media sit?
As the light fades and the end draws near, where does this sit upon the throne of skulls?
So Throne of Skulls is where we have a pile of skulls. I have a pile of skulls. Jay has a pile of skulls.
My pile is bigger.
Your pile is bigger now.
It's
although
one bigger.
We've set the precedent that we can discard skulls as well. We have 20 spots on our Throne of Skulls. It takes 20 Legos to make a Throne of Skulls, I guess. And we have organized them in our order of preference from bottom to top. So for me, I now have 8 on mine. You have 9 on yours, because I did not. And I'll just start with my 9th. I did not put World War Z on my Throne of Skulls, but I'll continue to reference it just for the sake of organizing things. And what is your 9th?
My 9th continues to be World War Z.
World War Z, sweet. So then from there, and I should probably actually pull up my list, because I once again have not had it in front of me. I have my list. My number 8 is Rangers of Shadow Deep.
So my number 8 continues to be The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh, my number 7 is Event Horizon.
7 is Astartes for me.
My number 6 is House of Hell.
Well, there's some irony. Number 6 for me is House of Hell.
Fantastic.
Now, here's the thing. I got to say something about this, because I wonder if this will continue to be an issue with game media for me. So one of the issues for me with this is because it's closed-ended and there's a way to win, it was really hard for me to decide where to put it. Because I think it was easier for me to see Rangers as darker because there's this ongoing dark story and you may never really win. But with this, because I know the dawn is in fact coming.
Sure.
It was hard to decide how far, because thematically I could have put it way higher.
Oh yeah. My headcanon is he gets back to the car and then the goat-headed cultists drag him away, screaming into the bushes. And then
it's the descent.
It's the descent, basically. Nice. Yeah. Like this doesn't end. There's a House of Hell too. It just keeps
Electric
going.
Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo, yeah. So here's number 6. All right. My number 5 is Hard Boiled.
5 for me is Event Horizon.
My number 4 is Astartes.
Rangers of Shadow Deep.
My number 3 is The Call of Cthulhu.
That is hard boiled for me.
My number 2 is The Last of Us Part 2.
That's The Thing.
And then my number 1 is The Thing.
And back to Call of Cthulhu as it should be for me.
Ah, yes. Good. So we have finished another one. And I think this is the right place for it. It's formative, but it's not going to be for everyone. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was important that we talked about this. I'm really glad we picked it because it's so personal to me. But this isn't like a thing I think everyone else should go out and watch tomorrow.
I don't think the format is going to appeal to everybody. I think that's the thing, right?
I think there's a lot of guys who watch this show who are our age who are going to agree with us. And there's a lot of people who are consuming more modern media who aren't our age, who are half our age, who are going to go like, that's cool. And I know about that intellectually now, but I have no reason to engage with this.
I think there's a lot of people that are probably going to be like, oh, I should pick up or reread House of Hell. And there's probably a lot of people that are like, oh, I should look up the wiki summary on this.
And both of those are equally valid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You don't need to, this isn't Rebel Moon where I'm telling you actively not to watch it. This is House of Hell where it's like,
don't
bring up Rebel Moon. Sorry.
I'm trying to be respectful and polite.
Every time I come down here, I make you, well, you haven't watched it yet. You haven't joined me in my squalor of hate watching Rebel Moon.
We just talked about the danger of joining cults. I'm not joining that cult. That's not a cult.
Watch Day of the Dead again.
I would rather go home and put a goat head on than watch Rebel Moon.
Fair enough. Just jump in a goat head next time. So we're back. We've restarted the cycle because we just finished game media. And that means we're back to the top. And it's film. And it's my turn to pick film because you picked Event Horizon.
I did pick Event Horizon.
So it's my turn to pick film.
Horizon.
So what do you think? Where do you think I'm taking this one?
Well, we've talked before about doing theme, not theme, and I want the choice to be the movie I put neck and neck with Event Horizon, which means I want In the Mouth of Madness.
I know you do.
We'll see what you pick.
Your term's coming around next month.
We'll see what
in
you
March.
picked.
This is my February pick. So, by the way, the patrons got to pick literary media for this month, and I'm going to give it until the end of the next episode, and then I'll tell you what it is. But it's going to be very interesting and not that long, which is good. But in the theme of what the patrons are angling towards right now, I have a couple of different ideas of what I want to do. I was thinking we've done horror. Yep. We've done sci-fi. You know what we haven't done is post-apocalyptic.
Oh, okay. That's not what I thought you were going to do.
Okay. We've done horror, sci-fi. We haven't done post-apocalyptic.
I thought you were going to go fantasy.
I thought about fantasy as well for a minute, but I'm waiting on fantasy. I thought there's a couple of fantasy ones that I thought you might want to pick. So I'm actually picking the Book of Eli.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And because this one ties to a bunch of other Grimdark Media that we haven't read a long time, like A Canticle for Leibowitz and a bunch of other things it's kind of derivative on. But I'm going to pick the Book of Eli. One, because it didn't, I think it deserves more hype because it didn't do well at the time.
Yeah, which I don't understand.
Because it has the most stacked cast. Yeah. Like, unbelievably stacked cast. And it's a fantastic watch.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Stevenson was in it, and I heard there was also some Academy Award winners in it, but whatever. Ray Stevenson was in it, and yeah, it's Ray Stevenson time.
It has yes, because that's your Punisher.
That's my Punisher.
That's your Punisher. That's your Titus.
No disrespect, John Barenthal, but Rafe Stevenson, that's my Punisher.
That's your Punisher. Yeah, your Titus Polo. So we are rest in power, Ray Stevenson, by the way. So we are back next week then with the Book of Eli. So you guys can watch along and check it out before we get started. And yeah, I'm excited about this one because we haven't done post-apocalyptic, and this one is one of my favorite modern post-apocalyptic, not George Miller.
Yeah,
movies.
it's really hard for me to think of a modern post-apocalyptic movie that I would think is objectively better than this.
Not made than George Miller.
Yeah. When I think of other post-apocalyptic movies I like, they're all noticeably older than Book of Eli.
Or they're not. They don't code post-apocalyptic the way that we. Because this code's Fallout.
Absolutely.
Right. Like this code's like classic dusty post-apocalyptic, which is like a genre. But there's a lot of post-apocalyptic, I think, that's modern. That's also very good. Like I could easily throw in Snowpiercer or was the Outpost with what's his name, with Bill Paxton in it.
There's. I'm not saying there's not other good ones. I'm saying
the Colony stories.
If I was going to rewatch something that I consider post-apocalyptic that I also consider modern, this still would have been it.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Sweet. Well, there you go, guys. See you next week for Book of Eli. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.